Coven sounds like oven, man.
On here, I thought it was Coven.
And that's just the start of the dialogue from American Movie. Hey, everybody. Welcome to Cheap Seat Critics.
Yeah,
I
we
am
made
hosting. I'm hosting. I'm a character called Sinister Boy.
I am a geeky writer.
I'm Crimson Maroon.
And I'm Sprinks.
Now, we had a lot of problems last time I hosted. I'm going to get them out of the way at the very beginning of this. I got a call from our sponsor who said, make sure you say at the beginning of this picture, what is the format? And this time we're doing something totally different. So if you've seen any formats before, this is not any of those. But there will be a narrative thread. You're going to be able to follow this. It's going to be good. All right.
Cool.
So the movie that I picked, and that everybody said that, oh my God, that was such a great pick. Oh my God, I love that movie.
It changed my life.
It was an interesting pick. I'll give it that.
Yeah. I picked American Movie. This is one that I kind of stumbled upon, fell in love with, and watched it a lot over a couple months. It's a documentary about making a movie.
That is accurate.
And
Yes.
and the reason that I picked this was because I think this is a very much us when we were younger.
When we were younger.
Yeah, when we were younger. I think it's a very close approximation. We didn't have film cameras, and we also weren't alcoholics at the time.
No, that's true.
Yeah. So, anyways,
I will admit, when the documentary showed us like everyone sleeping in the cutting room floor, I'm like, that would have been us if we were all going to college together for film back in the day.
Yeah. I kind of wish those kind of rooms still existed in a lot of places. That would be pretty cool. But anyways, so I'm just going to do a quick run through of the story of the movie, and then we're going to kind of jump in with our feelings, our thoughts, and opinions, and all that kind of stuff. So
right.
the basic plot of the movie, it's documentary, so there's not really any writers or anything. It's all, characters that exist. Basically, the plot of the movie is this director, Mark Borchardt, I believe is how you pronounce it. I don't know.
Yeah.
He is trying to make a feature film that he has been working on for, I believe, 6 years at the start of this documentary, and decides that instead he doesn't have the money to finance it or make it happen, and so decides to finish a short film that he started 2 years ago to then finance through DVD sales the production of his feature film, which is called Northwestern. And that's essentially the meat of the story as far as like what it's about. But I feel like it's about so much more as far as you can delve into the themes, and especially with this cast of characters, which are all weirdly Midwest, is probably a good way to put it, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can agree.
All the weird Midwestern kind of, I don't want to say yokels, because that would probably be a little bit offensive, but just like regular blue collar people.
Yeah. I got the same gist, so.
Yeah. You get interviews with his family, none of which seem very supportive of him, which I thought was really kind of funny and also heartbreaking at the same time.
I got the opposite. I felt like they were all quite supportive. They were just apprehensive about his odds of success.
It was a weird thing, because at the beginning, some of them were, and then for most of the middle, none of them were, and then at the very end, some of them turned back around. His brothers, I think.
The brother wearing
Alex.
Yeah.
Alex was.
I could see him working. I could see him being working in a freezer warehouse.
Yeah.
Thought he was gonna be a serial killer. I'm like, yeah, I don't think he was very supportive.
Yeah. I might be overusing the term supportive, but I was just going off of their talking. Like none of them really either seem to have much. I guess just because they'd seen it happen before. That's what we'll go off of. That he's had at least 3 different films not be finished, and then assuming this is going to be the next one that it won't be finished. But probably the closest thing to a co-protagonist in this movie that the protagonist of the movie would technically be the movie they're making, but the real protagonist is Mark, and then the co-protagonist would probably be Mike Schenk.
Yeah, his musician friend.
Who is probably both the best and worst person in this? I don't know. I'm joking as far as like, no. He's probably like the single most innocent person in this whole movie.
He certainly feels that way.
Did you guys believe him when he said he was off drugs?
No.
Yeah.
I mean, at the end, yes. Because he definitely... I thought he was on drugs until he said he was sober, and I'm like, oh, you're just in recovery, because if you do hardcore drugs, you kind of tend to be a little absent-minded, and that's what he came across to me as.
Yeah.
So I did believe it once they said he was sober for a fair bit amount of time.
There were definitely some long-term effects of past drug use.
Well, I think also he probably was... We don't really know. I think he also might have probably been on the spectrum, or had some sort of mental disability of some sort, and then probably exacerbated by lots of drugs and alcohol, which is pretty awesome. And that's sort of like there's a whole other cast of characters, but I'm not going to get into that right now. And so that's like most of the movie is just sort of them making this short 30. I think it's about a 30-minute. He's a 30-minute black and white, reversal, print that he's gonna, and he has to sell. I believe it's 3,000 copies in order to make the money needed to finance his feature film Northwestern.
Yeah, $14.95 a pop.
Yeah, and the title of this, the reason it's called American Movie is because he goes into this speech, this monologue very early on about the great American screenplay, the great American movie or feature film, and so that's why it's called an American movie.
Yeah. And I think the opening quote was a very good hook that Mark says.
Yeah. Like, I was a failure. I was a failure. I was an alcoholic, and I don't want to be that no more.
Mm-hmm. Very real.
I mean, and he's like about 30 by the time they're working on this. I believe he's about 30, maybe 29. Mm-hmm. A little over 30.
Yeah, he was 30 when Coven released.
Yeah. And I think it's definitely an interesting subject because I think you can kind of do the same sort of documentary for anything, but I think for this particular one, all the pieces are sort of there for a great kind of almost. I'm trying to think of like the correct terminology here, but like underdog,
window into this person's life kind of thing.
Yeah, because he's essentially a blue collar worker who is creative and wants to make art, but he's also coming from a position where that is not what you do. You work in a factory, you do a menial job,
40 hours a week, go home, that sort of thing.
And it's a very interesting kind of case where he's kind of done that, and he just realizes that that's not what he wants to do, but then he has and this is what I meant by like unsupportive. Like they're supportive of him, but they're also just being like, well, why doesn't he just do something that he doesn't have to be in debt, for like $5,000,
mm-hmm.
which is fair.
Yeah,
it's a fair criticism, but it's also like I think especially in film is a weird beast in that it costs a lot of money. It costs a lot of money. It takes a lot of time. And you know, like you see in this, I mean, this is kind of a little excessive that you know he's working on something for 6 years. That's not in most cases the norm, but like you know, it's a hard thing to kind of get a leg up in if you don't already have one.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's kind of an interesting examination of not just like filmmaking, but also like at what point does sort of I guess the economics of it hinder the creativity, or you know, hinder the ability to actually make something of yourself, which we see in a lot of this movie. I'm curious. I'm gonna turn it on you. You know, how did you feel watching this movie? I'm gonna go like probably gonna start with writer, and then we'll work our way down.
So I watched this movie in a interesting way. I got about halfway through it, and then I had to cook dinner. And I think I'm happy that I paused. Like I paused in the middle of the movie because I don't think I was liking it the first half of it because I came here with expectations, I guess, for a documentary because documentaries are typically about informing and educating, and I didn't really feel informed or educated going through it. And I'm halfway through it, so I had to pause. I had to step back. I went make myself dinner, brewed myself some tea, poured myself a beer, and then I just thought about it, what I had watched for about another half hour. And I think that's kind of I guess it clicked for me what I was actually here for. I wasn't necessarily being informed or educated about, um, I guess, filmmaking itself, but rather, I guess, the process of a particular creative mind.
Mm-hmm.
I think from that lens, once I understood that, I enjoyed it a lot more. Um, I suppose how I feel about it, I'm still torn, honestly. Because it's definitely different. It has left a different taste in my mouth than most documentaries do.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and whether it's good or bad, I don't think I've fully decided. Um, and it's, I guess it's where I feel it's very complicated for me to kind of express how I
Yeah.
feel about it because of that. Um, but it, but I guess as I said before we started, I thought it was interesting. That's pretty much a lot of things fall under that label for me and how this movie made me feel. So.
Mm-hmm. All right. Well, Crimson.
Was the question general thoughts?
General, how did you feel watching this, or what do you think you kind of got out of watching this?
I kind of similar to Ryder, where the first half was kind of boring to me, for being honest here. But once the ball started rolling, and we already, by a halfway point, we got introduced to, I think, most everybody involved in the making
cast
of
characters,
Coven and
Coven.
Northwestern. So that was the slow part. Was just a bunch of introductions of them and their viewpoints on Mark, and it was just a lot of the same kind of just different flavors from each person, essentially.
Mm-hmm.
But once they got to filming, and we saw a lot more of Mark's headspace with all the monetary setbacks and people not sticking around to the finish line. It did make it better towards the end for sure for me. But also with Ryder, I have not determined outright my definitive ratings for this yet. It is a very different thing because this is kind of, I view this more as a behind the scenes video than a documentary.
Yeah.
But it was interesting. It was definitely something I wouldn't have watched before this, which is always fun on here.
Mm.
There you go.
All right, and Sprinks.
I don't have that I guess, feel that Ryder and Crimson have like a halfway point where it changes. To me, it was pretty consistent all the way up to the Coven premiere, which is then it felt a little different. It felt relatively the same up to that point for me.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess that's not halfway, but at that point,
Yeah.
where I guess I felt what Ryder and Crimson are talking about.
Mm-hmm.
It felt very home video than documentary. It was the talking heads is what really gave it that documentary feel to me, opposed to everything else. But it did feel more home video, and that might just be from my own experience of home videos that were all pretty much recorded in the 90s, so they all have that look to them. The one thing that did help was it didn't have the VHS like recording thing and like the timer going by. It was just normal footage,
Mm-hmm.
to give it more of that, I guess, documentary or professional look to it. Yeah, it's definitely a very. It was not what I expected it to be. I'll say that. Going into this movie, I did not think of it was going to look what it is, even though the small synopsis you gave us, Sinister, was it's a film documentary about people making a movie, and that was essentially all the information you really gave to us. And going into this, it had more than I expected from just that, but it also had less in a way. So, because to me, it had more of the family and more of the day-to-day life and the jobs he was going through, but it also had less because it had chunks where the movie wasn't even something being discussed or talked about. So I guess that's where I lie with that.
Yeah, I mean, I would agree with that from a standpoint, but I mean, also, technically, it's about making a movie, just in general, just because you're making a movie that's.
It's less behind the scenes of making a movie, but more like the life behind making a movie, if that makes any sense. At least that's what I
will say,
would describe
though,
it as.
I like that nobody, or I like that everybody is in agreement, or in sort of a unified agreement of disagreement over that not feeling like it was a documentary.
Yeah,
because that was, I think,
I didn't know what format you were going to start with us, Sinister. So I actually, one of the questions I was going to ask is, do we all define this? Could we all define this as a documentary? And then, I was going to be interested in what people said about that.
I mean, by the textbook definition, this is a documentary. Mm-hmm. But what I was going to say is that I like
the textbook it is. By the primeval, it's not.
Well, I'm just saying it's a documentary film because it's non-fictional. Everything that's happening is happening in real life. These are real people. They're not, It's another thing of like, everybody's different when they're on camera anyways. But I feel like this is fairly probably, knowing Midwestern people, this is fairly, I think, they're not overacting. They're not, hamming up for the camera necessarily, probably. I don't know the people personally, so
everyone here felt real. Like I didn't, So like I definitely didn't feel like even in the interviews, I just felt that people were being themselves.
Yeah. So, but I think the thing that makes it different and why you feel, or why you would feel like it's not a documentary, is because there is such a almost scripted narrative quality to it that everything is kind of happening. Stuff fails when in a movie it would fail. Stuff succeeds when it's, at the last second when it's supposed to succeed. There's tension, there's drama, there's, waves and, highs and lows to every rising action and everything. And, of course, obviously, they're editing it together so that it has that narrative thread, I'm sure probably there was months in between or something where nothing was happening and they were, recording. I would also like to add a little back history to this, that the people who were filming this were essentially in the same position that Mark Burchard were in, where they would film like 1 week out of a month where they could get together the materials to film him filming his movie the same way he would film like 1 week out of a month, you know. So there's a little bit of, you know, kind of life imitating art here, but so they're not catching I'll say that I'm sure there's not like excess footage where they caught everything of the production, you know, because they're all kind of in this zone of not being financially stable enough to make a film or film everything every day. So that might also be a key of why this works against documentary, or against the feeling of it being a documentary. But the reason that I think related to this a lot is that I feel like this gets closer than a lot of other behind the scenes or making a film about kind of what making a movie is like. Like, because obviously they could have just shot like them only ever doing the movie, and that, you know, you would have gotten a sense of like a set or something. But that's not, you know, when you're making a film, you're making the film, and then you have everything else going on in your life happening also at the same time.
Especially this definitely captures the feeling, especially for like college students and just student filming in general, because you're always filming on the ground like this. It's a hobby, not your job, kind of thing. Yeah,
you know, because Mark works. He has a newspaper route. He works at a cemetery. You know, he does all these kind of odd jobs, and this is kind of like you're catching him when he's not, you know, when he's made the money to buy the film or, you know, pay the people to, you know, do work on this movie. And there is, you know, very honestly a lot of financial problems kind of shown in this, you know, throughout this movie, where, you know, they have a scene where he's going through his bills at the very beginning of all the, you know, he owes like $50 for his cell phone bill, you know, legal action from the IRS and all this other stuff. But my favorite part about that scene in the very beginning, where he's going through all these bills that he has, is he gets, you know, approved for a MasterCard, and he's immediately...
the way his face lights up was just awesome.
He's like, you know, it makes all of that, you know, depressive bills and everything just immediately go away, you know, which is a great, you know, I think a great little scene. Speaking of finances, we're introduced also to a character very early on, but becomes more apparent later, of his uncle Bill, who is essentially the financer of Coven, who is a very interesting character.
The best character.
Yeah. Is the Crimson character of the whole movie.
You're just saying that because Crimson's old.
He's old, and he's also he's way too honest. And Bill is a perfect mix of feeding into Mark's sort of not fantasy, but, you know, his love for, you know,
it's American dream.
Yeah. But also being brutally honest in that he doesn't believe in the project whatsoever the entire time. Which, you know, is a weird sort of double-sided coin, where...
Because Bill and Mark have a great relationship outside of that one specific aspect, it feels like, as well.
Yeah. There was... I watched a little bit of... They had a you know, director's commentary, or you know, it wasn't a director's commentary, but of the... Where, you know... Because Mark was talking about you know, because you only see like half of, or probably even a small bit of the relationship just that's filmed, but he would talk about, you know, I love just hanging out with the guy, you know, it was great because he was, you know, so interesting and all this other stuff. So there was a genuine relationship there, but it was definitely boiled down to just maybe the quotable bits, or, you know, the most, you know,
it's memorable bits. I did find the commentary as well. I got through some of it yesterday as well. And I'd agree that their relationship is very real beyond the money thing, even if that's just what the documentary had focused mostly on at the beginning.
Yeah, and I'm sure deep down he definitely believed in the project, and if you're given like somebody like $5,000, $3,000, like you have to have at least some semblance that you're gonna make the money back at some point.
Either that, or Bill just loved Mark in return because he found Mark also a very good person.
That's probably the other thing. It's because you have Bill, who's on probably the one end of the spectrum of the project, and then you have Mike Schenk, which is on the total opposite side. Whereas, at least as far as the film is concerned, real life is probably not so obvious, but you were going to say something.
Mike was, I was going to say, like, Mike was an interesting character because throughout this he was very supportive and helpful, but I feel like we didn't see much of him actually doing anything really. We had some scenes towards the end where he was helping cutting the tapes and stuff, but throughout production he's kind of just like, yeah, I'm with my friend. I like to drink.
I mean, like he does help him. I mean, like he helps set up scarecrows.
I'm not saying he didn't help at all, but with his help to not help ratio, I saw it was mostly like a friend hangout thing, which is largely how these like student films. I'd say this isn't a student film, but
independent,
like we brought up, independent. Yeah, usually how it goes. It's usually a group of friends that work on it. So.
Well, yeah, like at least as far as I can tell, I think the way that Mike Schenk helped out, we always have scenes where he's helping with production, he's helping editing, he's helping run the camera or getting extras together and all that stuff, but he stuck with it the whole way through.
Yep.
He was always there to kind of, if not like emotionally supporting him by helping out, and in whatever way he could by his limited knowledge of what which I think at the end of the day is probably what he needed more than anything else, was just somebody who would be there, regardless of skill or.
Mark could have Mike. I don't know what Mark would have turned into.
Yeah. I mean, my favorite moment one of my favorite moments in the documentary, because there's a few. Is where Mark is complaining like, I didn't want to get up today, and then my friend dropped in and smiled at me, and I wanted to get up and work a little bit after that. That to me was a wholesome moment that I think really encapsulates their friendship.
I would. I'm curious because we have a lot of Mark doing script writing and talking about writing in general. I was curious, writer, what do you think of his writing, or his thoughts on writing, I guess, and one or the other or both?
I found his process very, very interesting. Like where he goes to the airport to focus in and hone on his script because there's no distractions. There's no people in quotes for him to interact with while he's sitting in his car. So he's focused on his script writing task. Like that is something I understand. As for his writing, I can't say I know much of it because we're mostly shown like
just little bits.
We're shown little bits, and we know what he was trying to pay homage to. So I can't really say much about his writing directly, but from what I understand about his process, I found it very interesting. There is definitely a very relatable aspect to it because there are times where I have an idea, project kick, and I shut myself off from the world for a day or two and just focused in on that project, flushing it out and see if I want to do something with it and things like that. And on those days, sometimes I go to a cafe, or sometimes I go to a park and just sit by myself. And because I guess that to me is relatable in the sense that we have all our routines are more similar than they are dissimilar. when
Yeah.
it comes to the process itself.
Yeah. Interesting. Yeah. I remember there's a scene, I think it's about halfway through, where it's very interesting because I don't know how much of Coven they're reshooting versus just shooting in general. It's never made clear, which is probably for the best, that it's kind of, I guess, a little bit vague.
It's a little vague, and
yeah.
I mean, I am in the group that I actually I want to see Coven because we didn't really see it per se, so I do want to see the rest of the.
I'll touch on that. I'll touch on that in a little bit.
Okay.
That's a point I want to bring up later on. So there's a scene about halfway through where they're having to do this shot where he has to shove one of the actors through a cabinet.
Poor Tom.
Which, yeah, Tom, who is probably next to Mike, probably the biggest trooper of this whole production. Yeah, that guy. Whew. And I just immediately got, because it's all in, I think it's his mom's house, or, again, locations in this are kind of vague because it just sort of,
yeah,
bleed into each other. But
I mean, we filmed a lot, and we also filmed a lot in houses, so can't really.
I was like, man, that just looks exactly like how we used to film at somebody else's place. Better cameras, maybe, but so. And they have to do this. They have to do scoring on the cabinet so that it breaks, and
Yeah.
And they fuck up twice. They have to rescore it 2 times because it's still too strong. And the scene of him just like shoving the head in back and back, and then he tries to punch it to break it, and it doesn't break. And he's just like, "Oh man, dude, I'm sorry. I'm sorry I tried to put your head through this, man." Like,
yeah. I mean, the first time they try the head bashing and it doesn't work, and they open it up to look at the scoring, like, that's it? It looks like you just took an X-Acto knife and slashed it and called it a day. That's definitely not a deep
Again, this is what happens when you hire your friends to do...
Yeah, and I also like that in one of the shots that they had got it to work, but the other cabinet opened. Yeah. So it blocked the shot.
Yeah. Classic. It's just
very guerrilla filmmaking over here, and it reminds me of the old days.
Yeah, some of I think like the best parts of this are just sort of like the mishaps that just happen when you're filming something, and which on their own will be very, very funny, and then when you kind of remember, oh, like that's filming that camera. That cost, like a pop, and it's going, and you're fucked up, and that's money you're not gonna get. It's kind of like then it becomes you get in the mindset of like a filmmaker, and you get stressed. You get stressed.
Mm-hmm.
And I think some of the best scenes they're both funny, and then I think if you watch it again after you kind of know how it's gonna go, you kind of get in the mindset of you're on a budget, you have to get this shot. You just fucked up, and you're not going to get that money back, and you got to do this all over again.
That is something I wish they talked about more, because a couple times they brought up his debt stuff.
Yeah.
But we did see him having jobs, so I wish we got to see where his money went. Did he pay rent? Well, yeah, but I just wanted to see the distribution of it, because we didn't really see anything. We saw better equipment as time went on with like audio and stuff. Didn't know if he bought those or if he checked that out at the college.
Probably rented them. Yeah, I think that might have been said on the commentary.
I would assume he either rented them or checked it out from the college.
Yeah.
And then the film was very expensive, especially when you have to do 31 takes.
Well, that was audio, so that was a little bit different. But yeah.
This is an example. Yeah. I mean, just the cabinet one, there were a lot of takes for that. I'm sure we didn't see them all.
Yeah, I was watching that bit where he has Bill, who already doesn't really have a very good memory. Come out and he has to say 3 lines roughly three. He has to say three things or three, sentences or whatever. One sentence, but like three in three parts.
Yeah.
3 or 4 parts. And I was watching it, and my dad came in, and my dad was like horrified that he was putting an old man through like doing like 30 takes of, something like that. But that's, I mean, granted that's a little severe, but that's what you do when you don't have any actors or anything. You hire you get your family to do it. I mean, granted, you would hope you'd have a little bit better stuff to work with, but that's just what you do. You get it as cheap as you can get it.
Mm-hmm.
I guess I'll pose this question to you guys. Did you think he was forgetting? I just got the impression he didn't care and didn't want to go through.
Both. He was. I think he probably remember. He probably could do it, but he was just like couldn't be bothered. That's my take. I'm sure maybe Sprinks or a writer might have a little bit of different.
Sprinks, you go first.
I don't think he had that trouble remembering.
Yeah,
All right, thank you, Springs.
Yeah.
Bringing it on back.
Yeah, I also didn't know what to get. He seems pretty like he seems pretty coherent to me. So I think that scene alone was more is the only time I would have gotten indications that he has memory problems, just because he seemingly forgot the line a few times.
Yeah.
But I can also see the facet of he might not have cared all that much.
Yeah.
This is for the birds.
I think there's a lot of there's an interesting relationship there, as we've already kind of touched on, between him and Mark. So he's probably like, I'll do this, but I have no real interest in doing it, so I'm not gonna try too hard. I can see that being the case, and then I can also see him being probably woke him up very early. He's out in the cold. He's in a car. That's not probably a mixture of just like lots of bad timing, and then him just kind of not caring.
Mm-hmm.
Again, the other thing though, right after that, when my dad came in and was watching it, he was like, that guy, you don't see filmmakers like that really hardly anymore. Like no directors like out there kind of actually like doing all of this stuff. They have a DP, they have a cinematographer, they have all this other stuff, but you're not going to see George Lucas with a handheld camera going up to somebody and getting down and dirty. Which, I'm not saying that like that's how it should be.
Yeah.
Because obviously George Lucas is very, very successful, so he doesn't have to do that anymore.
There are a few directors, but I will agree that they are getting rarer and rarer. I think most of my examples would be TV show directors, more so than big budget ones. Because I could think of instances where J.J. Abrams likes to hold the camera because he likes to do the shaky cam himself. Most times, and then my only other example is Zack Snyder, who wanted desperately to hold the camera for most of Man of Steel, to the film's detriment, I think, most cases. But
well, it's like I think at least what I'm going to try to word his thinking into was that I think there's very few directors now that kind of know how to do at least the basics of a lot of filmmaking stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Where I don't think you should be like, I'm making a multi-million-dollar movie and I have to do everything. I don't think that's necessarily the case, but I know with at least David Fincher, one of his like creed, like his thing that he's on about, is like, I want to know how to do the job so that I can explain to, that I can work with you to understand how I want it to be. Which is a different thing. But.
Yeah, I actually, this might be a good segue to talk about Taika for a second. Taika Waititi, I have a lot of respect for, and he's definitely, just from where he started. Because he definitely started with a low budget and the thing where he and his friends were making props by themselves, and they were taking down like hand-me-downs and calling up department stores and just taking, do you have any rejected things that we can use and things like that, and they strung like strings to do special effects and things like that.
Well, yeah, that was the other when I was also kind of piggyback off of that. It also reminded me of the early like horror films of like Peter Jackson, because Peter Jackson, living in New Zealand, also in New Zealand, so Taika Waititi, very similar. There really isn't much of a film, kind of boom over there. There's not really a filmmaking kind of career, at least at the time, when they were both kind of starting out. I think Taika Waititi probably came at a time when there was one, but so I'm kind of, Mark and Peter Jackson are kind of, there's not really a big filmmaking boom in Wisconsin. There's also, at the time, Peter Jackson in the 70s and 80s, there really wasn't much of a film department in New Zealand. Mm-hmm. And, Peter Jackson, he worked at, I think it was a newspaper print makers, and he would just save all his money up from the week, and on the weekend he would go shoot film on like this Bowflex or Boloflex or whatever camera, and that would be what he could do, and he would just the whole week through just think of scenes for movies or for the weekend. Mm-hmm. And he would make his own props and also it is kind of like, I think you would think that with all this new technology and everything, it's more easy to sort of take up and kind of do it on your own. But I do think that it is becoming kind of lost, just kind of making shit yourself, or making, making your own sort of creativity.
Yeah, because the stuff in our iPhones is more powerful than, the stuff we were using in the early 2000s to make films.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
So...
I mean, you can make a feature film on an iPhone now.
That has been done too.
It has been done, yeah. It's it's
and like Hardcore Henry, that was on a GoPro.
Yeah.
I forgot about that.
Yeah. That was the whole one of the selling points of it.
I mean, I know it was a all first person shooter, but I didn't know that it was all filmed on a GoPro.
Mm. I mean, that's probably the only way they could do it. I don't think they could have it.
Yeah,
because those big high-end movies, those cameras are massive.
Yeah.
So,
it's a very. It is becoming kind of, and I mean, we kind of at least got a bit of that when we were in school, where we kind of had to make our own props and we had to find our own sets and backdrops.
Make our own beards.
Yeah, make our own beards
out of yarn.
Out of yarn.
Shout out to you, Chad, wherever you are. Thank you for that.
Yeah. Film The Hobbit. And I think that's another thing I like about this. It's kind of catching, I don't know if an industry, but it is sort of like this. It's right before the internet kind of takes over. It's kind of right at that end where you could kind of, I guess, do something that, is just your own sort of vision of what you want. Whereas you're not getting like a whole bunch. Not to say he doesn't have inspiration. We had the beginning where he has like all these books on film and all these influences he has, but he's sort of like in this island in Wisconsin where he's just kind of making films. And he doesn't really have like a distributor or anything, and it's just kind of like this petri dish where he's not like influenced by like a bunch of people that are kind of out doing their own films and everything so much. It's just because he doesn't have anything.
He's away from that culture of just what it is to make a movie. So he's just a very, very different perspective on it.
Yeah, they bring up a couple of times like, well, what are you gonna what do you think a movie producer is? Sex and drugs and power. Like they really have like kind of no, other than like, if we sell DVDs, we get money that we can then finance, the next, phase of production. They don't really have a kind of a film industry background, which is probably both a good and a bad thing.
But he does have lots of experience in his short films.
Yeah, now this is kind of a little bit skipping, but I'm going to talk a little about Coven.
All right.
And, put an umlaut in there. We do not get to see any of Coven until the very end of this American movie.
Yeah.
And the whole time you're watching it, or I think at least I felt like the whole time I'm watching it, you're kind of almost expecting it to look kind of bad, or you're not really expecting much of it, I guess, at the very least.
Well,
Because,
they show the rejected footage from the one their failed attempts, which
or yeah, for Northwestern,
yeah,
which does look fairly good, but it's not, it's definitely not in the style that Coven would be in. But so you're kind of at least for most of the movie up until probably maybe that point, you're expecting something amateurish, because we do see some of his other earlier stuff from like the Scarier, which is the series that he did, which is kind of, I guess, like Friday the 13th esque guide. It's a weird. It's very.
It looks like a slasher sort of.
It's a slasher, and it's very like kids in their backyard making
what they
Friday
can.
the 13th on it. Yeah, which is not it doesn't look awful most of the time, but it's definitely not professional. But anyways. So you're, and you see these cast of people that are working on this, and you're just kind of like, man, this is just going to be like some Ed Wood schlock or something. And then you get to see some of like, the stuff at the very end, and I actually would kind of want to watch that. Like, it actually looks good.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like, from what we saw of his, I guess, later works and failed test footage, is I like his use of the black and white. I like the ratios he used, because he went really dark on the darks.
Yeah.
And I think it looked pretty good with the shots he typically chose. Like we had like a panning shot of like a bunch of cars, and
yeah,
I don't remember if that was a junkyard or
it was
lot,
and it was a camera in a wheelbarrow.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I thought that looked good.
Yeah.
The actual Coven footage we saw towards the end, though, that I don't think would inherently grab me to watch it. But
well, what I was saying was it looked like you could see the difference in between.
You could see there's effort for sure.
Yeah, like there was actual. I'll say this: there looked like there was skill. Like he knew what he like. You're getting like him talking about his influences and what he has and everything throughout most of the movie, and things that inspired him, and he's throwing off a bunch of technical terminology. But I didn't really get a sense of like him actually being a good filmmaker until you see some of the Northwestern production footage, and then the Coven stuff at the end, where you actually get a sense of like, oh wow, everything he said he was going to do is in these shots. Like, it's actually there. Granted, I'm sure probably the movie's just sort of okay. I'm sure maybe they cherry picked some of the best scenes or something for like the purpose of drawing in like.
They definitely picked, at least for us, the scenes that we saw the behind the scenes stuff for.
Yeah,
like the scarecrows.
Yeah, the scarecrow, which looked awesome. I want to say I like the scarecrows, but and again, it's obviously filming in black and white for financial reasons, probably more so than artistic reasons. But he used that as an artistic thing. He actually made a very good black and white, presentation. The shadows and everything are very, dark, and then the lights are very, the ratio, like Crimson said, is very good. It's very cinematic for black and white. Which again is another thing that's kind of lost is now that you can do anything. You really don't want to make a film in black and white.
Yeah, I mean,
I
guess to ask you, Springs, what did you think of all the short films and I guess what we saw of Coven at the end, Coven?
It's fine because that's kind of what this was all leading up to. So I think it was fine that it was short. I guess that's the right word. Short for what it was and what was shown. Um, I think Mark's speech at the end was very, very characterized of Mark, kind of just thanking the crew, and a bit to like a million thanks to whoever else showed up. But I think it was fine. I think it was a little maybe too lengthy going through the beginning intro part that was shown in American Movie. But other than that, I think it was fine. I think it could have been good if there was some footage of Mark actually watching his movie at the premiere. That's
No,
about it. It reminded me of Saving Mr. Banks.
no, I meant more like
Yeah.
the black and white
The-
ratio. Like,
yeah,
what did you
like
think of the?
the films that were shown that he made? How do you feel about
His film
them?
style.
Yeah.
I don't think I can fully answer that since very little was ever shown and it's not the full film. It's just
Not
like a
what you
shot
thought
here
of
and a shot
Coven,
there.
just his style of filming.
It's an independent. It's an independent way of going about
Do
it.
you think the cinematography was good?
Good.
For what you saw, would you judge it as good, or would you say it was?
And this is
okay?
off of what Mark's black and white.
Anything.
Everything
Everything
is
just his style.
Yeah.
Like
This is a huge question then.
yeah, like I was asked about the
Okay.
writing, so I mean,
Yeah.
Okay, this is a bigger question than I thought. Mark's cinematography style is personalized to independent. I'll say that because it's all just him. I think it could have been a lot stronger if he didn't have so much on his plate and he could just focus on that solely. He was doing the writing, the directing, the talking with producing, and all this other stuff in the background. So I think it did affect his cinematography for the worse. Cinematography of the film itself, as I said earlier, it's kind of just home movie. Nothing really out of the question was really shown. I think the only thing that was kind of good for cinematography choices for this documentary was at parts during speaking. They had just a photo of like his kid sleeping or like a mug on a table, so it wasn't always on a person. I think that did strengthen it for those shots. I think my favorite cinematography thing that they did I guess it also fixed into editing was when Bill was singing Bye Bye Blues, it continued showing other shots rather than just Bill himself singing. But it is not, I can't be too strict on it or harsh on it because it's an independently done camera shots. It's not someone who went to school to train for it. So I can't really judge them too harshly on that. But for what is shown and what is used, I think it's very middle ground. It could have been worse, could have been better. And that goes both for the black and white shots of Mark's movies that were shown in American Movie and then the American Movie cinematography itself.
Well, I guess for the cinematography and I don't know. I'm not gonna chirp too much on that one.
Chirp.
Yeah.
fair enough.
Yeah, I guess I'll add on to that since we most of Sprinks' points were towards the documentary film making itself was in American Movie, not Mark's independent films.
Yeah.
It was pretty home film, as Sprinks said. It didn't really stand out too much. There were a couple overlay thoughts where audio carried over to a different shot, like he said with Bill's song. There were a couple other moments I caught, and I am glad that it was not like shaky cam. It was pretty stable for the most part. So there was a more of a professional vibe to it. It didn't feel strictly homemade because those typically aren't very stable. Yeah, there were no moments in this where, because of the way the camera was set up or something, I thought a scene was staged or anything. because that's something that can happen sometimes, where the camera's in a spot where it wouldn't make sense, and you're like, okay, so they just set up this scenario just for the documentary.
Yeah.
It all felt like it could have been in the moment, which it most likely was. So I think it all worked out in that regards.
Like I said earlier, the documentarians for this were pretty much when they were filming. That was when they could film. So as far as I'm aware, it's been a while since I watched the commentary for it. I don't think they ever had him reenact anything or do any kind of setups or something.
Mm-hmm.
If they did, it was just to explain something that had happened beforehand, but not to reenact it in any way. All right, so we got Mark's writing, we got Mark's cinematography.
His location scouting.
His location scout, who he falls in love with.
Yeah,
which is kind of an interesting little part of the story.
Yes, I actually have a question about that. So the woman he falls in love with is different from the woman who walked out with his kids, right?
Yeah, that's not the same. Yeah,
okay, so he had the kids before he met this person. All right.
Yeah.
I was just curious because I was confused for a moment at some point later in the documentary, and that clears it up. So.
Yeah. They do have an interaction with him and his ex-girlfriend, which is pretty funny just because of how weird the scenario is. Yeah, no kidding. Yeah, yelling at her and stuff.
In front of the kids.
They're playing around though. They don't know what's going on.
I think they could see the dad.
Yeah. No, I was like,
mom.
Yeah. And I was like, wow, that's awful, but yeah.
It's very real life visceral moment though.
Yeah. It's a very it kind of comes out of nowhere, and then it's very.
Yeah. And then he's in the car when you find him next. He's just working away in his car.
Yeah.
That was probably one of the better moments for me, and this was that was a pretty low moment for him in this. He's like, I'm pretty much all alone filming the final scene here.
Yeah, and he just turns.
Left.
And it goes with his he just turns his depression into passion, which is kind of what a lot of artists do, and it's kind of what I do. So,
I think that's probably one of my favorite things just about this is that kind of, again, I think I'm getting a little disagreement, at least from a few. But it's a movie about movie making where kind of everything goes wrong. I mean, pretty much financially everything kind of goes wrong.
His life isn't going well.
his personal life is kind of in shambles. His family kind of supports him every now and again, but it kind of seems like they're kind of just waiting for him to stop making movies and kind of get a real job.
I mean, obviously, the worst thing in his personal life is the fact that he's a Packers fan. Just saying.
Yeah, the Packers fan. Yeah, he's a Packers fan. He's an alcoholic.
Was that a bad thing in the 90s? Being a Packers fan?
I'm a 49ers fan, Crimson.
Yeah, he's a 49er. That's their rival. He's an alcoholic who makes Coven is supposed to, Coven is supposed to be anti AA in a way. I think is sort of, at least from the outset, I guess, is a little bit.
The story was it was a Alcoholics Anonymous Society gone wrong or something like that.
Yeah, kind of. We get a little bit into that, which I guess is kind of what a lot of people are sort of. At least what Alex is like, I don't really understand what the point of the movie, is or something. Which is then made weirder because Mike Schenk is in AA and kind of asking him about the group.
Yeah.
But, and so everything is sort of bad. And yet he doesn't he has moments where he's kind of like, I'm depressed and I don't want to do anything. But then he still finds, a way to keep going and finish it. Which is probably the greatest trait any filmmaker can have. is to
push on
have,
ahead.
Yeah, to have everything not be going at all the way it's supposed to go and still manage to finish it regardless. Which is probably a bigger feat than making a really good movie, is to actually finish making an okay movie that has nothing but issues. So
at least independent films.
Independent films. That's what I don't know. I think a big budget movie that has everything, like you have like casts get broken legs and shit, and you have them try to pull the wool underneath you is pretty hard as well. Anything with a terrible production, and then still managing to make the movie at the very end, because most of the time they just pull the plug. But you know.
Yeah. There was I don't remember the movie or the director, but I know there's a story of a director who was writing this script like the night before shooting, and that's what he did every day while they were out on location.
That seems pretty, standard.
That sounds familiar.
Yeah, well, I think our film teacher is the one that told us that in high school.
Yeah. I know there's a couple like. I know with like Alien 3 they didn't have a script the entire time they were shooting that, which shows. There's a couple. I mean, this is definitely a couple. Versions of that same sort of story where it's like they don't have anything, and it's a weird thing because I think in this one, at least like production wise, everything is kind of. Like, he has storyboards, he has a script kind of finished. Mm-hmm. Like, I think all the times he's working on a script, it's for Northwestern and not for Coven. But it still has, it doesn't really matter because there's all these other issues that just kind of pop up, that are not related to the production whatsoever. I liked the editing room stuff.
Editing room stuff felt very cool. I like
that they were basically just living in there, and I think in the director's commentary he was just like, the college was just letting me stay there for like a month or whatever, and like just until I got it done. Which I don't think that would happen nowadays, but
no.
I think if you get the permission, they don't mind.
Yeah, probably.
But
probably if you go there, but if you don't go there, probably not.
Once again, I think it's permission based. Then again, I've never really tried, so I wouldn't know.
Yeah, he probably just showed them like, this is the work that I've been doing, and this is how far along I am, and they were probably like, go for it,
Mm-hmm. They respected the passion, and it's just like, all right.
Yeah. And because granted, we didn't sleep where we edited, generally. But that was very similar to in school. Granted, we had computers and a little bit better editing software, but it was kind of like that where you just kind of sit and do your movie,
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, we had overnighters where we were filming, so
we did have overnighters where we were filming. I was just saying like the editing room stuff that was a little bit different, but we had overnighters and we had we didn't have 2-year-long productions.
I do remember. I think it was after like one of like the huge field trips or whatever. And like half of us in the film group had gone on the field trip, so there was a day where there was a bunch of sleeping bags out in the bungalow, and half of us were using computers, some of us were editing, some of us were just watching movies, and like the other half were just sleeping on tables with their sleeping bags out. So that's probably the closest I could think of to a moment like that where it happened in our teacher's bungalow.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of like, again, it's a very specific type of person, I think, that's willing to go through this.
Yeah.
It's you have to either be sure you're going to be a success, or you just want to have it finished, Yeah. And there was an interesting part earlier when he was watching Northwestern stuff where he was talking about how he didn't like finishing things because you could never go back.
Once you're done,
Yeah, once he was like, there was something, and I know for at least like the 4 projects that were going on that we were shown, there that he had that weren't not finished never got finished. And I was always curious about, like, you know, especially, you know, after this movie, because this movie won a Sundance Award, so he would have gotten some level of recognition, and he has done a couple of things since then. But he never finished like Northwestern. He never finished a bunch of other stuff. It was very curious, kind of, if that was at all, you know, was kind of just like either the production had been too long and he couldn't, you know, really find a way to finish it, or if it was, you know, part of that thing of like, as soon as it's done, and I have to, you know, release it as it is, and I can't ever change it, kind of thing. I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I was pretty disappointed when I found out he never finished Northwestern. After I watched it, I looked it up to see if it was made.
Yeah.
And I was quite saddened, since he was given $50,000, which is the budget he needed. And I know there's hurdles and all that other stuff. We established a lot of those through this film. But I really, with his dedication through this whole thing, I thought he would have made it work.
You know, it might have been, at least, I don't know. Because, like I said, the movie only covers whatever was going on in his life at the time. He has done some stuff, and I think he's probably interviewed, maybe brought up something about why stuff like, you know, didn't get finished. But you know, he could have just, you know, decided that, like, at that time in his life, he didn't really want to make that movie anymore, or, you know, his life had changed so much where he couldn't kind of go back and sort of recapture that, you know, the essence of that film.
Also, as an artist, it's perfectly natural to just grow out of projects and move on from them. I have a lot of unfinished stories that I'm probably never going to get back to. So, it's...
And I think especially for... I mean, granted, he didn't become like a, you know, a big hotshot director, I guess, in the normal sense, after this movie came out. But I think, you know, at least the subject matter for Northwestern, the main project, was a very different mindset than what was probably going to come, you know, than he could be in after that. He kind of had this sort of exposure where he kind of, you know, that project no longer made sense to him, or emotionally he wasn't that person anymore.
Mm-hmm.
But I like the story that he kind of came up with, that it was sort of like this, you know, John Ford kind of working man, blue collar type life story kind of thing. Mm-hmm. It seemed interesting. It might not have been for the time probably very good. Not very good, and the movie would have been bad. I just mean, like, in the 90s, late 90s, like early 2000s, that might not probably have done very well, just because of the... He probably would have been great in the 70s. He probably would have done really, really well if he had come... But, you know, he probably would be a very different filmmaker, so...
Yeah.
Either way, but, yeah, because, you know, at least from, like, the looks of Northwestern, it looked very much like a kind of 70s sort of down and out, you know, movie with probably kind of either a bummer ending or sort of just a full circle back to where you started kind of thing.
Yeah, I definitely got the vibe it probably would have been bittersweet at its best for an emotional payoff. But
he liked his dark stories.
Yeah,
it's true. Well, I mean, he was and I wonder about. They did do some check-ins with some of these guys, I think 10 or so years later after this came out. I don't know if him and Mike Shank are still friends or anything like that. You know, it might just be one of those. Yeah, it might. But, you know, granted, I don't think there's probably it was no ill will or anything. It was probably just, you know, a kind of, yeah, the vodka ran. Yeah, I do believe he's still sober though, so that's, you know, power to him on that.
Good for him.
Yeah. You know, it's weird because the movie ends. The movie ends with him having succeeded in making the movie. It comes out, and, you know, they do the theater thing and everything. Bill gets to see the movie come out. And then immediately, like, after the theater and the thank yous and all that stuff, all he's doing is talking about the next project, which is very much a filmmaker,
Yeah.
thing. It's once you finish that movie, you got to start the next one.
Yep.
And you kind of you think and then of course we find out that Bill died. I think shortly after. I don't know the timeline.
Coven came out June 12th, and Bill passed away September 13th.
So about 3 or 4 months. June, July, August, September. Yeah, 4 months roughly.
And that's what my life is like. Whenever I finish a short story, I just move on to the next one. It's like, I don't really relish in it. I mean, to go back to edit it, but I don't relish in the fact that I've completed a story outside of, all right, I'm going to go downstairs, take a shot, and then move on to the next one tomorrow.
So it's an interesting, and it's kind of like you get like a payoff of, oh, they finished it, it's great, and then I like that little addition at the end of like, okay, what's the next one? It kind of, it's a cliffhanger almost, but not really, because it's documentary. They're not going to do a, American movie 2.
Yeah.
Yeah. But, it's this kind of, thing of like, that's how it is. You finish, you get all the adrenaline and you get the payoff, and then it's on to the next one. It's on to the next, 2-year-long production or whatever,
Mm-hmm.
And we do find out that Bill left him his money and everything to finish.
Yeah, Bill was preloaded.
$300. Yeah.
$280,000.
Yeah.
$280,000. He lived in a trailer.
Smart living.
Yeah, smart live. Yeah, he just saved all his money. I don't think we ever found out what he did.
I don't think so.
Yeah. I don't know if we ever found out like what job he'd had. Obviously, he wasn't working at the time, but that's another thing I wanted to. Probably the most kind of like one of the most depressing scenes, or like at least downer scenes, I think, in the whole thing is where he it's like Thanksgiving and he gives Bill a bath.
Mm-hmm. I didn't find that depressing. I found that very sweet.
I found that wholesome. Yeah.
Yeah.
See, that was like I found it probably more wholesome afterwards, but I think it was just because of how like when he was cleaning his clothes, he was like really pissed off, and he seemed kind of like he was like, man, it's not worth the money kind of thing. I'm assuming that was one small instance out of probably more good ones that they kind of cherry picked or whatever for the film, put it in there.
I mean, one of the more sad things for me was Bill in his trailer when Mark's like, well, what do you dream about? He's like,
I don't dream about
anything. I don't have anything really left in my life. Like, oh,
yeah.
okay.
I mean, that's I was meaning depressing in the way of like, just like the nature of, because it is a sweet scene. He's bathing him and everything, but I think it's just because of like all of like the outside influences of like he's financially responsible, he's he's isn't really it almost came off kind of like it was just kind of for the money. I know it wasn't the case.
Mm-hmm.
I know enough about the movie that wasn't just for the money, but it was almost played off in that way, at least as far as the film was concerned to portray it that way. But I'm sure it was a sweet scene.
That's a wicked ass toenail.
Wicked ass toenail. You could be science book. Yeah, I think I'm gonna stop talking, and I'm gonna let everybody else just kind of finish. Like, any thoughts you haven't gotten out that you thought about this movie? I think I'm taking a lot of air up here.
Let's see. Do I have any? I'm trying to think of like a specific scene that stood out to me. When he when he got his job at the cemetery, and how he talks about how the boss looked him in the eye and shook his hand. I think this is going to be a very nice, we have a very good future together, a very long relationship. And he talks about how that fucking terrified him. Because he doesn't want He doesn't want to
You'll
be there.
never catch me dead vacuuming a hallway, and then they cut to him vacuuming a hallway.
Well, like he doesn't want to be doing that for years. Just the whole thing. Like this
Yeah.
is not a job I want to get
That's
stuck in, you know, for years on end.
Well, they reminded me, because that was a thing I talked about with Crimson. This was years ago. Of I think we were still in school. He was talking about jobs. You know, it's his main thing. He's like, I just don't want to not have my time. I don't want to like be at work for like 8 or so hours, and then I only have like 2 hours to do my thing or something.
Yeah, I got very good at cranking out my daily pages within an hour and a half when I worked a full-time job. Spriggs is familiar with that.
Yeah.
Yes, I am.
I think Crimson was going to say something, so I'm sorry I cut you off there.
No, go ahead.
Oh, me? Oh, well,
Yeah,
I was going to go on to a new topic.
Okay, go for it.
Well, okay, the mom, we haven't really talked about her in this yet.
Yeah, she's Swedish.
Yeah, there were moments where it was hard for me to understand what she was saying. So, a little confusing in that regards, but I really did not like how Mark treated her in this. I know he was stressed out and all that. I'm mostly pointing towards every time she tried to help him. He was very rude to her because he really wants the shots done right. And he had no one else to help except her.
I mean, there was a lot. There was a lot in that scene. Like I mean, I get snippy with my parents, so that's all. That's all I saw in that. They were just getting a little snippy with each other, and that's what happens when you're both stressed out. I've definitely been on the receiving end of parents yelling at me, especially when they're very stressed, and I've definitely yelled at them now that I'm older and don't fear being punished when I'm stressed.
That was definitely a scene that I had a little bit of an issue with, but I was like, yeah, I've been in those situations where I'm asking someone to do something that I think is very, very simple because I'm familiar with it, and then the person isn't meeting the expectation that I think it should be, and then you get frustrated. But and I think she handled it very well. I don't think she ever got retorted back in some way, so I think she understood
Well, she was definitely not confrontational.
She was not confrontational. I don't think
she took anything dished out.
Yeah, I think she understood this is stress and not him just trying to be mean and everything.
And I like how she admitted that she didn't think he'd make it.
But I don't think so.
Gutsy of her to say that on camera. I think she would, because Mark probably would have seen this.
I mean, but they all in the commentary we was talking about all the scenes with his dad talking, and he's just he's like, yeah, all he talks about is how good the grades were and how promising I was, and he never really acknowledges anything that I do. Otherwise, it's all just about progress and things. Which again, that's what I said early on. I was interested in the fact that most of his family were kind of being blatantly not against him, but unsupportive, at different parts of the movie.
They're like, haha, he'll grow out of it, that sort of thing.
Yeah. And especially his brother wearing the Hooters shirt. It was pretty good.
I mean, I think Chris was more supportive than Alex.
Yeah, no, I was saying I liked him wearing the Hooters shirt. I wasn't saying he was being unsupportive. He was kind of middle ground where he was being... Yeah. I understand why he's doing it, but also I think he could be doing something else, whereas Alex was just no, I think it's just stupid what he's doing, and it's awful,
Yeah, and he's going to be a serial killer or stalker.
I mean, his only real talent is his mouth. That's the only...
But is that not what all podcasting is? Talent with your mouth?
Well, I mean, that's how you... But, it's interesting, because, he says his only talent is his mouth. That's sort of the only reason he succeeds in most of the situations, really. That he convinces these people to help him for next to nothing or nothing at all.
Yeah, because he definitely exudes a passion that definitely can pull you in, I think.
I like there was that guy, the actor who was coming in for, or the guy who was coming in for Northwestern, who then shows up when they're filming the kitchen scene in Coven. He was like, "Now I thought I don't know why he's spending his time doing this short when we're supposed to be doing his pre-production for Coven, and then I come to find out that he's been working on Northwestern for 6 years."
Was that not his Hooters brother?
No.
No,
Oh,
I thought
down as
that
his
was
brother.
his casting director, not his casting director. His
No,
his production designer.
It
looked like him.
I don't think any of those titles really mean much in the scope of this movie.
Yeah, I mean,
yeah,
they're there because they needed to give him something.
It's professional. I guess. Yeah, it's professional. But yeah, so I found that very funny at the time. It was just like him coming to the realization, but still like, but it's funny though. He was told this, and he was just like but I gotta give him credit that he actually is willing to stick it out for more than 2 or 3 years. It's impressive.
I guess something I would have liked to have seen, because we saw a lot of aspects of making a film. I would have liked to see him in his final stages of like getting the movie theater and the distribution.
I can tell you, in 2004, Coven had sold 5,000 copies.
Yes. So I would have liked to have seen that aspect, because we didn't really get anything of how we got the theater. And I was surprised how many people showed up.
You could just pay a theater though
I mean, I'm not that surprised because they posted flyers everywhere, and I mean, if it's a local filmmaker, like as in you would go to a local artist for their gallery or book signing, I kind of took it to mean that like they were just there to support their community almost.
Yeah, like Sam Raimi when they did which was originally called Book of the Dead. They he had a theater in Detroit, play it, and there was a big thing and everything. I'm sure he paid them or had it worked out where they didn't just do it for free, but it used to be a thing when there were local theaters that you could do that. Now you really can't, but so I understand where you're coming from though, but I think that was kind of taken away from the narrative of the film a little bit, just kind of overly showing all that stuff. I will agree that I think that last kind of was a bit of a jog, kind of getting to the ending a little bit. It was pretty fast, but I think it worked overall.
Yeah, I like that we still see like the relationship with his children, like he's taking them also for overnighters at the university. Yeah,
he has a good relationship with the exception of that public fight. He has at least it seems to have a good relationship with his kids, and they seem to like him, and
amenable at least.
They helped him film.
Yeah, they're interested in what he's doing, and he kind of teaches them.
Yeah.
I do like though that they're asked at the end like, "Well, are you going to become filmmakers?" And they're like, "No,
too hard work. Yeah,
too hard. It costs too much money." Like. That was pretty funny, but there's I think the thing that's different about this than a lot of documentaries, there's a lot of heart in this.
It feels very real, and I think that's what helps.
It's like I said, the moments that are funny, they feel so funny that they have to be like scripted because they're so like perfectly timed. Almost. And then, and then also like and of course this is in editing, so, the ups and downs of, the rising action, all that stuff are probably maybe edited a little bit, but they feel organic enough where you don't really, you're not thinking that they just cherry picked moments so much, at least throughout when you're watching it anyways, afterwards you can kind of just, think about that, but, it's interesting. And I don't think, with a few exceptions, I don't think I've ever seen a documentary done in quite the same way or at the same level.
just the like level of
organic.
yeah.
Like, where it feels real. And I'm sure, I'm sure there was a little bit of coaxing in some form or another, because that's the whole thing with a documentary is who is being exploited in this, setup or, whatever. Because obviously the movie, this documentary won at Sundance, and then Coven kind of just disappeared or whatever, so who probably won more was probably the directors of this, which also I would like to add, the directors of this went on to do most of the Netflix documentaries. The main one of which was the Jim and Andy documentary about Jim Carrey doing the Andy Kaufman movie, which I liked a lot. But so they've done a bunch of.
I didn't know that. Good for them.
Yeah, I remember I looked into that, so I did know that at a time, but I refreshed my memory recently. I'm glad I put that all the way at the end instead of at the beginning, so now they're not. That's going to get lost, but no, it's so there is a fair level of who's kind of being exploited for media purposes in this, but at the end of the day, I think this is probably more realistic of a certain type of film production. I'm not going to say of film production in general, but of the beginnings of film production, which generally in most cases you don't get to see.
Mm-hmm. Very guerrilla take.
Yeah, you don't really get to see like the production behind like Steven Spielberg's first movies or George Lucas's first movies or Christopher Nolan's, which, and I remember. This is a little bit of a philosophical thing, but I remember.
I love that. So
yeah, I came across this little video essay a year or so ago. It was a short little 3-minute thing, and we all know what a prodigy is.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. A prodigy, it's somebody that has a natural talent for some form of ability, whether it's writing, making music. You can probably mostly hear it music prodigies, or math prodigies and things that have an innate ability and an innate, innately excel at certain topics or certain, things.
Mm-hmm.
And the video essay was about how there are no film prodigies, in the sense that there are people that are inherently good at film, but nobody comes out of the gate and is making blockbuster, great movies or, masterpieces. All your favorite film directors had about probably 15 or 20 awful films before they had their first really good film.
Yeah.
I guess, Steven Spielberg didn't make Jaws and then, nothing else before. He made several, little films when he was a kid, when he was a student, and, da-da-da-da. And the same with George Lucas. He made a bunch of movies before he made THX 138 and all that stuff, or Star Wars.
Mm-hmm.
It's something, film is something where you're constantly learning and getting better at every time you do it.
Yeah, it's part of what makes film such and cinema in general such a amazing field to work in.
Yeah, because you're constantly problem solving. You're constantly coming into issues that you haven't had before. You're constantly doing this and that. But I think what this movie does really, really well, and what I think is the main crux of it, and why I think it's the one thing you can kind of say about it that you can't really argue with, but I'll open it for that if not.
Fair enough.
Is that it's something where you get to see a filmmaker, not necessarily at the very beginning, but at a beginning, at a crossroads almost, making something, and you get to see not like, magnifying glass level or, but you get to see what it's like making sort of your first venture into something.
Something that's, has a longer script than you normally might, because when you're in school, you're only working on 5-minute, 6-minute scripts. They're working on a half hour, 45-minute scripts. And
yeah, and you get to you get to kind of see what level of dedication, what, you know, emotional dedication you kind of have to sort of be in this this world of filmmaking. And granted, I've read like probably another one, a close second to this, as I've read a bunch of books on the making of the first Evil Dead movie, which I think is fairly similar in the production scale to Coven. Granted, this is a 30-minute short, and Evil Dead was, you know, about an hour and a half, but a similar time constraint, similar, you know, budgetary value, I'm sure. And that's kind of, you know, it's very rare that you get kind of a history of people's kind of first ventures into making movies, or a comprehensive, you know, look at what making a movie can be like from the beginnings, from the ground up. And that's what this movie, I think, the main, you know, thing about this movie is you get to see that, and you get to experience it, and you kind of get to learn from it in a way. And I, you know,
what it's like for people who don't have big budget corporations backing you.
This is like, you know, this is kind of ground zero for filmmaking. You know, this is like, and granted, this isn't his first film. He's made, you know, littler films when he was a kid, and you know, Northwestern and everything. So you're not getting it from the ground up necessarily, but you're getting a peek into it. Because I would love to have had this sort of thing, you know, growing up, for like, you know, your Nolans and your Finchers, and, you know, kind of getting this bird's eye view of like, oh, I'm not there yet, but also they weren't there yet when they were making something. You know, it's kind of like a humbling thing to, you know, because I think if you watch a big movie and then you're like, I could never do that, and it's like, well, they couldn't do that either when they were at your stage, you know. So it is a great thing, and I really do think, I wish this could have been shown when I was like in high school or something.
As kind of like, if our teacher did show us this in class, would it have changed your perspective on film then? Just like I guess either the hopeful aspect of it, or the insight that you would have.
Yeah. So when I was a kid and I wanted to make films, I have two movies in the back of my mind when I think about like what made me want to pursue that in some, you know, in some form or another. Granted, I'm more in music than probably film now, but, you know, there was two movies, and they were both fairly independent movies. The one that I watched that made me want to make films was Quentin Tarantino's Reservoir Dogs.
Yeah.
But you know, that's, you know, I'm sure that's, you know, oh, Quentin Tarantino fan, whatever. But anyways, that was what made me want to make films. But then, you know, you can get kind of stuck in that or whatever, and then you kind of, you know, you reach where you think your abilities are or whatever, and then you kind of, you know, rethink that or whatever. But the movie that made me want to make movies was Reservoir Dogs. But the movie that showed me that I could make movies was Evil Dead. And I got exposure to Evil Dead because our film teacher brought in this news clipping, or this printed out news clipping. It was from, you know, a newspaper interview or a magazine that had done with Sam Raimi, where he was working on Evil Dead 2 at the time, and so they were talking about how he made Evil Dead 1 a success by making it so low budget, and then, you know, VHS rentals and all that stuff, and kind of made his career off of that. And that kind of showed me that you could do something that was small scale, that could be successful, and that could be amateurish, but had skill behind it, you know?
Yeah.
And I think that, you know, this movie would probably, it might have gotten me on that path a little bit sooner, maybe, because I could see like somebody actually doing it, whereas instead of like reading about it or like watching the movie. But I think like this is a really good representation of exposure to the, you know, both the highs and lows of filmmaking, where, you know, if you are committed, you can do it, but you have to commit to it. You can't, you know, just be like, I'm going to do it when it's good, and then I'm not going to do it when it's hard. It's like, no, you have to do it when it's hard, and when it's easy, you have to, give the same level of 110%.
Yeah. And, because any artist in their field will have a bad day where, for me, writer's block, artist, that pen isn't working as well for you, it's just how it is. And then you have all the other life problems that happen around what you're trying to do and what you're trying to create.
Yeah.
And I do agree that this is a very it provides a lens to that.
Mm-hmm.
I guess not only the roadblocks, but like the determination that you have to have in order to get over those roadblocks.
Yeah. And because any job, because when you're a filmmaker, or when you're a successful filmmaker, filmmaking is your job. That's it's a fun job sometimes, but it can also it's a job. And if you're a famous artist, you paint, and that's your job. Or if you're a writer, you write, and that's your job. And I think at any point, no matter how much you love the thing you're doing, at a certain point, you would wish you could do anything other than this, this thing.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's a job. But it's a job that you chose, and it's a job that you're good at, and it's a job, it's kind of like at some point you wake up and you're like, holy shit, this thing is working. I should probably get really, really good at this thing, this thing,
mm-hmm.
and, not try to fuck this up because this is working and I don't have any fallback plan. Which is, the wake-up call you have like every other day.
Yeah, the one that makes you go to work in the morning when you rather than not to.
Like, maybe don't get fired, which is the audience is your boss. Don't so
Yeah. No, I get that.
Yeah. So that's my philosophical corner for this thing, and I think of the thing that that generates, that connects with me the most is just this, you gotta be, when you're making anything, you have to be serious about it in some way.
Mm-hmm.
And I wish he had done more after this, but I think just by, having this documentary made and having it be out there, he probably created a good amount of filmmakers who decided that they wanted to do something that they didn't think was possible before. And I think that's probably the greatest thing you can have.
I would hope so. I mean, the last thing you want to do, even if I am, let's say, I'm very strict when it comes to writing, obviously, but the last thing I want to do is to discourage writers. I mean, like, I hope you get better at your craft. That's the one thing I want, prospective writers, I just want you to get better at your craft. That's the one thing I want you to do. But I can definitely see the facet of the angle that you're coming from this, because there is, because it's such a real world lens into what it's like into being a filmmaker, like without any real big huge following or backing, and you're just trying to break through you're trying to create something that's in your vision while also dealing with the constant limitations and of just both yourself and your life and the people that you have to incorporate into your film, like your actors and your friends who want to help you with this, because everyone has different lives, different schedules, and it's definitely it's a group effort, this creative process. And I think that's, even though this is in the vision of Mark, I do feel the group effort as well.
Yeah. Like, I think if it had just been him working on it, I don't think it would have turned out in the way of, that it, or, I don't think it would have had that sort of community, because there's a bunch of people that are coming out to watch it. There's a bunch of people that are, excited about it, that, want to see him, want to see his vision. And granted, I think he is, he's kind of painted in some scenes as being very alienated from people, very lonely. But I think he does have, like, he understands that the community is what really matters, and that's, you know, what he's, for we see him with Northwestern, he's trying to kind of represent these people that he lives with, that he works with, you know, and he thinks that these are people that should have movies made about them. And I think that's, you know, another a really good quality to have, that, you know, you kind of coming from this world that wouldn't necessarily be a filmmaker's paradise, you know, the middle of Wisconsin, you know.
Not center stage, shall we say.
Yeah, but that you want to have those people have as much exposure as Tom Cruise, or, you know, whoever else, Ryan Gosling or something, I don't know, you know. You know, you want those people to have as much of a shot at being, you know, portrayed, you know, as anybody else, which is a fairly noble thing. And granted, it wins you very few favors as far as, you know, the movie industry is concerned. Because the last thing they want is to have people see themselves on screen.
Yeah.
So, you know, it's a, you know, it might be a, you know, something that's doomed to fail, or doomed to not succeed, you know, to the fullest extent. But I think if this documentary had any kind of, you know, positives behind it, I really do hope that it made a lot of people see themselves and be able to, you know that they could do something without, you know, any kind of industry backing them, or any kind of, you know, approval from an industry. They could just sort of go and do it. And while they might not be, like, you know, multimillionaires, they could, you know, do something artistically relevant and portray something that they don't get to see on the screen, or something they don't see out there.
You know, pass this over to Crimson and Springs, because I've been.
Listen. I've talked a lot. I've said a lot. I haven't given a lot of people a chance to speak. I'm sorry. I'm really into this movie. That's no excuse, though. I'm a bag of hot air today. I want to hear everybody. What I want to hear from everybody.
Starting with Springs.
Yeah.
Okay. Something to point out in this movie. I thought it was interesting in an edit. When they interviewed the children, they didn't have any of the children's names as headers, since they had it with the brothers and the parents and other people in the movie. So I thought that was an interesting choice. I didn't know if that's a legal thing because they're minors or underage, but
it might be their underage. Their mom could have just said no, because, you know,
that could have been it.
Yeah, it might have been to avoid probably issues with that. Yeah.
I immediately after that, they were talking about bending a knife, and in the background, the cupboard from earlier that was broken, broken with the head, is now fixed, which made me think: is this documentary or shots shown out of order?
I think that was a later pickup shot. I think they probably replaced the cabinet or fixed it. I don't think that was out of order necessarily.
Yeah, I could see it either way. Because there's probably moments, like you said, sister, where they cut this to be more cinematic, I guess, where the highs and lows. So they could have put scenes earlier in the timeline that would fit to amplify a certain scene.
The only reason I'm thinking that it probably happened in the way it happened is just because there was literally nobody else there helping him with the the project at the time. Or am I thinking? No, that's when they're stabbing his leg, right? Or they're doing the fake leg thing.
Talking about it, yeah.
Yeah.
That was probably pretty close to this. I don't know. It might have been a little before or after, but
another guerrilla moment to pull out from this would be when he complained that no one was showing up to his to film some Coven, and he was like, and they all bailed on me, Mom. I need your help.
Yeah.
and she was busy and didn't want to help.
But she
He
did.
got her to do it.
Yeah, his gift is his mouth. His talent is his mouth. Got her to do it. Yeah, I don't.
For me, I thought this was going to be a film about Northwestern, so
Aha!
that yeah, and I don't know how I feel about it being about Coven, because they talk a lot about Northwestern in the beginning. We get to see all the meetings they had, or at least 4 or 5 of them.
It was 4.
Yeah, and
Which gradually get less and less people.
yeah, and since we find out that Northwestern's not that relevant by the end of this, other than it was a project sidelined to make money from Coven to make it, it kind of just seems like wasted time to me. At least having all 4 of the meetings there.
Oh, but don't you see, Crimson? The world building is very important.
Yeah.
They were just building up to something that didn't happen.
Well,
and I don't think they needed to build the tower that high to not
well,
knock
I
it
think
over.
the issue is when they started doing the documentary, it was about Northwestern, and so then their subject says like, oh well, I can't do that. I'm going to do a different movie. So they're going to be like, well, we'll come back when you're going to do Northwestern, or do they just stick with it because they already committed to it?
I mean, this was all edited afterwards, so they could have cut that stuff out.
Yeah, but they're also but it's not necessarily about Northwestern. It's just about, well, I guess it is about Northwestern, but it's focusing on Coven, or they're focusing on Northwestern. So that Northwestern's the project that they want to be doing. But he's not working on Northwestern, so they're going to be filming the Coven stuff because that's like what they're filming. That's what they're actually kind of doing. So you can get a glimpse of what it would be like if they were shooting Northwestern.
I guess.
Something
I felt
I think
afterwards.
That I know where you're coming from, but I think also they were as limited on their ability and budget to kind of film what they could to get it done, and so they couldn't just be like, well, we're going to get rid of that, like, all that stuff that we filmed in the beginning and only focus on this. And they're like, okay, well, that's only going to be about 45 minutes. I think it was like probably an economical decision to be like, okay, well, we're going to follow that through. I'm assuming. You could be right.
Oh, it could just be a personal thing. What do the other 2 think about that?
Yeah.
Did
everybody feel gypped when it wasn't actually about Northwestern? That's the real question.
I got the tone shift immediately. It's like, and then when his friend went, and along came Coven, and I'm like, yeah. I kind of got it there. I got it fairly quickly, and then once they started, then especially once he gave his breakdown after the whiteboard thing of how he's going to make money, how he needs to do this to make money for Northwestern.
Yeah.
I kind of got the gist of what this was going to be about then.
Yeah.
So I guess it wasn't a big shock for me. How about you, Sprinks?
It didn't shock me really at all. I didn't think this was a movie about Northwestern. And I thought it was pretty smooth or normal how they just went about discussing that it was just going to go into Coven.
Mm-hmm.
So it didn't really jar me in any way.
Yeah.
Guess we'll just meet him.
Yeah, you're alone, like Mark in the car.
I know. Filming the last scene.
How is that depression hitting you now?
I'm also sure that when they were filming this, they assumed that he was going to do Northwestern at some point. So maybe we just have the advantage of hindsight, being able to look back 30 years and be like, oh yeah, he never did do that. So I'm sure at the time he had all intents and purposes going to do that. Something changed that we do not know about.
Yep.
Just the way it goes in the business we call show.
Yeah.
How the cookie crumbles.
I don't have any lingering thoughts because I kind of bounced off with you, Sinister, about the whole on the philosophical end of things. So I think I agree with you philosophically. I don't think I enjoyed the documentary, but I have to watch it again, which is an odd.
Great segue there.
Yeah, it's an odd feeling in there for me. So just.
I know where you're coming from. However, I did not enjoy. It's very.
I mean,
the entire film. I get you. I understand.
Yeah, it's definitely not what I expected, as I said. So I don't know. It's still. I didn't enjoy it as much as I thought I would in retrospect, but I think it's because I was expecting something different. So it's a balance of like I need to rewatch it again because my feelings on it are still complicated.
Don't worry, my liking of you is not based on your liking of my movies.
Yes, I know.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah,
mostly.
That's I mean, I would hope so.
Yeah.
I guess on my end, I feel like I went through all my talking points through it. So I think I'm good on the movie front.
On the movie front? What about on a story front? What about on
the story front? That there's not much story technically.
Did you like the music? Did you like the audio?
Well, you know what? That's a great point. I'll go over. What's his face? Chris? No, Mike.
Mike Shank. Mike Shank. But the music for the documentary, yeah.
Yeah, it was fine.
It was acoustic classical.
It was average. Just acoustic guitar.
But he did it blindfolded.
He did. I wrote that down.
That was awesome.
But yeah, I mean, it was fine. It wasn't like energetic or anything. It was just it was background. It was there. It was present.
Did you like the scene where he was talking about how he ripped off of Black Sabbath?
Yeah, and how no one has original thoughts, and it's all based off of other properties.
You know, you can't have an original thought. It's all everybody else's idea, and you're off his voice.
I wonder what the guy with the first idea he was the smartest person ever.
I don't even know when that was.
BC probably.
Oh yeah, definitely.
I also my other favorite Mike thing was, gambling. Sometimes you win, sometimes you lose, but with drugs you always lose.
And that's why he does the lottery.
He does the scratch offs.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And he wins like $50, and then he wins like $200.
Yeah.
And his Alcoholics Anonymous guy sends him to scratch offs. Who's also in Gambling Anonymous.
Thank you. What did you guys think of Mike's story?
Oh, his acid story?
Yeah, where he woke up in the hospital because he thought he was going to die.
He was the worst patient they ever had.
Yeah, he was the worst case. His brain signs were non-existent.
He was brain dead.
Yeah. And then he wanted to do a tab of acid immediately after he woke up.
Totally within character.
Commitment to cause right there. I'll give him that.
Yeah, and then his mom came in with the bag and threw it in the toilet and crushed it.
That level of addiction, I don't know how you can recover from it.
Like I said,
you're in the hospital, just nearly avoided death, and I need more drugs to kill myself right now.
Well, and then he was like, and then I kept using drugs until about a year and a half ago.
Which that didn't really fit the timeline, which is why I brought up earlier. If you believed if he stopped using drugs, because in the beginning he said he stopped using drugs, but then later during this acid conversation, he's like, "It's been a year and a half." I'm like, "Okay, well, the beginning of this when you first said it, that was like 6 years ago."
No, that was in '96. So that was
that was within the frame.
Yeah.
In the beginning.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, that was within the timeline. Yeah.
Oh, then never mind.
He was definitely
point mute.
He is just a very fried individual, and it's. I don't think he was ever, at least granted we don't see any behind the scenes stuff for that, but I don't think he probably was using anything, especially because anytime he was offered, he was like no. He would just have soda.
Yeah, sure, soda. I wrote that down.
Yeah,
he brought a bag of something.
Yeah, we saw it
And
on
he's
the
like,
table, though.
soda.
Yeah, we saw it on the table, though.
Oh, there could have been other stuff in there.
Oh. Anyways, but
Spanx, what do you think of Mike? We haven't really heard you talk about Mike.
I rewatched I watched the Acid Story 3 times.
because you didn't understand it.
No, because I wanted to make sure I knew how many times he said in his story. He said 20 times.
That's what I do.
Yeah, we all have our ticks.
Yeah, I have that.
It was either it was either I write down how many times he said or how many times Mark says man in the movie.
Listen,
I'll go with this one.
No one says man like Mark Bouchard.
Yeah. One thing I not to move off of Mike so suddenly, but one thing I actually, I guess, I don't know. Mark always approached something that could have been very, very philosophical and deep, but then he just moves right along. It's very in character. Yeah. But I'm like, wow, that's interesting. And then he moves right along. I'm like, you're not going to explain that to the camera anymore?
Well, there's that scene in the car where he's talking about how he's a Satanist, and then they just immediately...
half Satanist and half Christian.
Yeah, and then they never follow that up. Which is, it comes out of nowhere, and then it's immediately gone.
Yeah, well, I think it's in the context of, like...
Yeah.
He wants to... It's not about... Like, he complains how Christians are, like, always... It's always about the end goal. They're not necessarily living their best life here. So he wants to succeed and make... He's like, I'm a giver, but I'm not an absurd giver. That sort of thing.
Yeah. It's true.
Yeah, I would have liked some more elaboration on that, because I was like, all right.
Yeah. Well, he has these, he does have, like, these weird, like, weirdly philosophical, Midwestern moments, and then he's immediately, like, afterwards, like, watching the Packers play. I mean,
yeah.
It's just, and maybe it's just because he's drunk or something. I don't know. Because when he was drunk on that, when they were watching the Packers play and they won, that was a little uncomfortable.
Oh yeah, and I always feel like he's drunk in this.
Ass motherfuckers.
Yeah. I mean, there's a level of, like, I actually, I was like you, Crimson. I halfway for the film, I thought they were both he and Mike were druggies, and I left notes and, like, are they druggies, or is this just how they are?
Just weird.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, I think there's stuff going on upstairs. Could have been effects from drugs and alcohol. Could have been something else. They're definitely interesting characters, for sure.
Yeah. Mike is probably a little bit of both. I think Mark is just weird. Like, he's just, kind of a geeky Midwestern guy, and he's just a character.
He's just a character,
yeah. He's just a character. Whereas I think Mike Shank is probably, like, he was probably not fully up in the mental faculties to begin with, and then several doses of acid and vodka later, just, is pretty much non there, but fun guy. I'd like to drink some vodka with him.
I guess I got a Bill question.
A Bill question? We don't talk about Bill enough. Come on.
Do you guys think he was truly supportive of him through this?
I mean, he left him money.
He left him the money at the end.
Yeah.
But I'm saying through this as a whole. Because he definitely vocally says he doesn't.
Yeah, that's what
He didn't want to participate in it in any facet. He definitely didn't want to give the $3,000 to start it. So I'm curious each of your thoughts on Bill here.
Well, I guess I'll start.
Writer,
Yeah. Bill, I think, like, because Bill's Mark's uncle, and I genuinely think that he loves Mark, which is why he ultimately ends up supporting him at the end. As for him being supportive throughout the whole film, I thought one of the points that this documentary was attempting to make was, like, Mark is still that spark in his life. You know, because Bill doesn't seem to have much going on when Mark isn't there. So I assume that's ultimately why he ends up relenting even earlier in the film. It's just Mark is one of the few members of his family that's just paying constant attention to him because Mark just adores him, and in vice versa. So that's pretty much all I have to say on that. So I'll pass this right
Yeah.
along.
At least from what we learn later on, Bill was kind of a lot like Mark is sort of now, where he kind of like was the creative of the family in some form or another. Uh, I feel like his brother, Mark's dad, kind of subtracts it, or is subtractive of it, where he's just like, yeah, he just knew how to spell words, and he knew all the words, But so he's probably like some, and you can see him like writing songs and stuff. So he's probably some sort of writer, or uh, scholarly kind of guy, and maybe years of alcohol, or maybe just decreasing the mental faculties.
Peppermint schnapps.
Yeah.
Peppermint.
I admittedly smirked
Yeah.
when he was being given alcohol and other drinks, and he was like, all right, old man still got it.
Yeah. So I think and I think he sees a little bit of himself maybe in Mark in some capacity, and is trying to sort of, and at the very end where he's kind of giving him that speech that seems sort of nonsensical. I think he's trying to communicate something of like how you can, how you should be creative and you should follow, your creative, endeavors and all that stuff. But like how we kind of see with Mark, most of the rest of his life is kind of in shambles. Like so that like yes, you should follow, your creativity, but you should also take care of your home. You should also take care of your family. It shouldn't just be the work. It should be about the work and family.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's kind of what his last couple of dialogue with him is kind of about. So I do think he feels like a connection with him and can kind of see himself in him, but knowing who he is now is kind of trying to keep him leveled and not just going down the path of following his dream, but also staying in touch with reality.
Mm-hmm.
And so that might be why, and maybe he's just trying to get his goat a couple times where he's just like, I don't believe in any of this. That's, oh man, you barely even started. I mean, kind of thing of just sort of keeping him grounded and knowing where he's at and not trying to like overreach.
And East Springs.
I forgot the original question.
How do you view Bill's support level of Mark?
Oh, from not, I don't think it's the first scene he's in, but the scene where Mark goes to his trailer to visit him, I wrote down that Bill as a producer was such a small care kind of towards the project that it results the relationship into a frustrating comedy. Because Mark doesn't yell at him or get mad at him, but he tells him like all the details of what's going to happen, and Bill just nods, rubs his fingers, still goes along with it, and accepts what's happening, but is very apprehensive and cautious. But because of his, I guess, elderly state, it's not very expressive, so it just looks almost uncaring. But he stuck with it through and through to the end, and they did. Oh man, I think he, at least in the movie, it said like 34 takes of the one line, until he was finally sick of it. So that just showing how long he would keep trying with Mark until it just got to a point of ridiculousness. And said,
or at least like how much you would put up with.
Yeah.
Just like, fuck it.
And then at the end, he left him some money to help with his dream, which was very nice.
One thing,
especially since
Continue.
I was just gonna say it didn't really show any other family member and their interaction or relationship with Bill. It was all just from Mark's. So
Yeah,
I'm sure Mark isn't the only person who gave him a bath.
Yeah.
But that's the one that they showed show you.
Yeah. I mean, that's a big commitment there.
Yeah.
To bathe somebody.
Do you think? I'll pose this to you, Spring, since you seem to be very, very observant with Bill. Do you think he gave, presumably through a will, the 50,000? Do you think he gave that to him after he saw Coven success, or where do you think he decided?
I think that was definitely after. I think that was after he saw the whole thing and was there at the premiere, and Mark told him the numbers again and how things were going. I think that really helped Bill see that there was an actual population, which is something I wrote down, which was a bit odd because their only advertising for the film was a set amount of posters that they had to quote unquote strategically place, and the turnout was pretty large for just the town they were in. I'm unsure if word got out anywhere else or people invited people out of state or from other towns. There's definitely family, of course, but I think that really helped Bill see the reach of what Mark was doing. So I do believe that sum that was given to Mark was after the premiere.
Right. Yeah, I'm inclined to agree.
Because beforehand, when they went to the bank and Mark was just telling him, "You just sign," he was very confused about that. And then later on, it brought up how much money he thought he had in the bank, but he has no idea if it's still there.
Mm-hmm.
As far as I know, no extra money at least was ever like taken out. It was fairly above board as far as he never like took out like $80,000 and then never gave it back kind of thing. As far as I know.
I guess another thing on Bill's relationship with Mark, I like that Mark gave him a flyer with pictures of girls in it, as if that was going to try and help.
Well, I think it was showing the production and how the casting calls went.
Yeah.
Because we got to see the casting calls as well. Which it was interesting to see how Mark was upset with their portrayal of his script. He was unhappy with them, and he stepped in.
Yep.
Yeah.
I guess that was interesting in that he actually. It's a hard one because I think he was assuming he knew what the emotional input was supposed to be, and was then upset that they weren't reaching that level that he was thinking it needed to be. So I don't know. That was interesting though. It's interesting. I don't know if I would have done that, but
no. I mean, we tried a casting call before. We didn't get quite a good turnout as Mark.
No. We got some good people though.
Yeah,
but we didn't do the whole,
We didn't really advertise it either.
Yeah, well.
That's pretty much the only questions I left. I think we covered all the other characters I care about.
We didn't. We missed one thing about Mike Shank.
Oh.
He did the single greatest scream I think I've ever heard in anything.
the ADR.
Yeah.
Yeah, I had to turn down my volume because I was afraid the rest of the household was going to just hear that.
That needs to be your new ringtone.
No, I won't do that one.
Yeah. No, that was pretty incredible.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, all the people that screamed definitely put some effort into that.
Yeah. That was wicked, man.
That was totally wicked.
And his face, he was so happy. That was good. Yeah, Mike Shank, definitely the hero of this movie.
Bill.
Yeah, Mike Shank. You just like Bill because he's cantankerous and he speaks his mind.
Yeah,
I assume that's what Crimson relates to.
yeah. I'm
because he
probably
knows
going to be a Bill if
you're
I
gonna
ever
be a
get that
Bill.
old.
You are. You're gonna have $1 million and smell like a butt.
Is that what old people smell like?
No, I'm just saying you're gonna like save. You're not gonna spend any money on water. Cleaning yourself. It's all gonna just get saved up. You're gonna live in a trailer and be a millionaire. Wear shorts and socks and
Precisely.
sandals.
Strengths, did you have anything else to point out?
I did have to double check something because I thought it was an odd confusion, but it was fine that the production of Mark's is Northwest Production for a movie called Northwestern. Yeah. And then he keeps it for Coven.
Like we kept Merry Band pretty much for a while there.
I just think it's interesting that the name of his first, well, not his first, but like his main one of Northwestern is the name of the production he went with for himself.
Yeah,
he's very proud of that movie that never got made.
I mean, like he's very, very passionate about it. I kind of get that.
Yeah.
Like
and probably.
Go ahead.
Probably also from my that was he had to have a production company to be able to finance or get money back off of it, and so I'm going to be making Northwestern, so it has to be like similar to that, and
Mm-hmm.
a mix of both of like that's my baby, and then also just to have something that you could it was really easy. It's weird they're calling it Northwestern when they're in the Midwest.
Well, I mean, plenty of movies are claimed to be somewhere else but filmed elsewhere.
Is that true?
Yes.
Yeah, Star Wars was filmed in Guatemala.
Star Wars actually happened. That was a documentary.
No, it was filmed in a galaxy far, far away.
Yeah.
A long time ago.
In Guadalajara. That's where I go, hey man, what's up? All the time. But why are there white people then? If they're in a galaxy far from it doesn't make any sense. Wait, are they humans? What?
That is what the point is. Are they humans?
Are they human? Or do they just look like humans? Wait a second. Are you trying to tell me that Harrison Ford is playing Harrison Ford? Yeah. So is that all the final thoughts we have on Northwestern, a.k.a. Coven, American movie?
That's all I had, I think. I'm still going through my notes right now. Mostly I was just writing down what happens, and I'm just looking for stuff that stuck out to me.
Was there anything else that we didn't cover that somebody wanted to cover?
I recognized only one actor in this movie.
It was the guy, wasn't it?
It was Billy Crystal on the TV.
Yeah.
That's funny.
This is the year of independent film.
I recognize the Packers game. There's that.
You did. You actually. What game was that?
It was the Super Bowl.
Thank you, writer.
I guess I like his.
Who did they beat?
Oh yeah, who did they beat?
Yeah, who did they beat in that Super Bowl?
Looked like the Cowboys. I actually have to double check.
Yeah, it was like 1996, I believe.
I like Mark's audio recordings of the woods. There's no birds here, and I just hear trucks.
Did you like that? Like in the winter when they were filming, he was like,
it was the Patriots.
Oh wow, that's actually pretty impressive then.
I think that was Brett Favre era though, so that
not as cool. Yeah, did anybody catch that when they were filming in the summertime, the interior, they're like, it's supposed to be the dead of winter, we're hearing birds, we gotta muffle that sound, and then when they're filming in the winter, you can't hear any birds.
I thought it was funny,
True.
and I liked when they were doing the final ADR recordings for when they're beating up the car. They were complaining about a plane flying overhead. He's like, "Where the fuck is that plane?"
Classic.
That would be my
Classic.
last point.
That would have been your last point.
Yes.
The birds or the lack of birds.
Yes.
Yes. That's having done sound for a student film. That's pretty on point, actually.
Yeah, you either get lucky or you don't.
Yeah, that was it. That was an. So this is off topic a little bit, but so when I was doing sound for that student picture, they had like monitors up, right? So you could see like what they were shooting.
Mm-hmm.
These good sized monitors. And they had these great, like, it was all in color, and they had these great shots and everything, and, and I was saying, wow, it looks really cool, and I was really impressed because they were using really good cameras. This actually looks like, like a film, like an actual, like, film. And then I was, I was talking to, like, one of, like, the kid DPs or whatever. Kid, he was probably, like, 25, but,
Yeah.
The junior DP, in training or I was talking to him about it, and I was like, wow, this looks like great. Yeah. And it's going to be in black and white. And I was like, what? He's like, yeah, it's going to be in black and white. And I was like, but the monitors and color. He's like, yeah, we're going to do that in post. And I was like, what? Because I know, and listen, I'm no Martin Scorsese. I'm no Orson Welles. But I know that when you're shooting a film and you're going to want it to be in black and white, you have to shoot in black and white. Because the shadows are going to be, again, ratio.
Yeah.
Because you have to have the lighting correct in order for it to work. And if you're looking at it in color and then do it in post, it's not going to look right because it's going to be off.
Mm-hmm.
And so that I was just thinking about that. That was the point I was going to say earlier. About with because he does it in black and white, and you have to have that be exactly right, or else it's going to look fake and it's going to look bad. So that was my last point.
Yeah, fair enough.
My little story.
Yeah. Did we want to move to ratings, or at least attempt to give ratings?
Well, the ratings for this movie, I believe about 500 people went and saw it, and I know at least 4 more have seen it now. So 504 people. No, I just one at Sundance. What can I say? Yeah, we can go to. Is everybody done? Have I talked over enough people now that we can get to the end of this movie?
I think so.
Yeah, you think?
So.
Yeah, I think so. Okay. All right. So we'll go in order here. Writer.
All right. As I said, my experience with this was I'm gonna start with subjective. My experience with this is mixed, and I have only seen it once, so this is subject to change at some point. But as I said, I had to step away and kind of reorient myself. Make dinner. Had to have a big old think first. And I personally enjoy when I have to do that. So this is probably going to be a 6 out of 10 for me subjectively. So it's not horrible. It's not. But it wasn't great because, as I said, I went into this with certain expectations, and I'd have to rewatch the whole documentary, understanding what it is now, what I came out with it for. And that being said, for objective, when we moved out, when I understood what this was going for, and after the discussion, what I think the purpose of this documentary is, I do think it accomplishes its goal, which is just kind of an insight to, at least how I'm reading this as a documentary, it is an insight to a creative mind and how that mind works. And then all the life problems and everything else that happens to orbit it. I'm gonna give this a 7. I think out of 10 objectively.
Okay.
Crimson.
Okay. I'm going to start out with my objectives score here. So, objectively, there's a lot less to work with here with no writing involved and technically no characters since these are just normal people. So it's mainly off of camera work and editing choices and lighting, more mechanical stuff at this point. I think I brought up earlier the camera work was decent. It wasn't shaky or anything. The camera angles did their jobs. Nothing special. It's just documentary style, of course. There was a point where you could see the boom mic in Bill's trailer.
Yeah, we should talk about that in the commentary.
Oh. Yeah, I noticed it. So that's a tick. That's 5 points off. So I saw the boom mic. There were parts, I guess arguably, that could have been cut, or scenes that I feel like should have been included, like the whole theater. And like Spring said, it seems that it was just a few posters, and it got a big audience. So I would have liked to have seen at least them put posters outside of the school, because that's pretty much all we saw was the school. So I would have liked to seen more of that, and I think it would have bolstered it, made it a little bit better for the crowds at the end. And I think the whole Thanksgiving bit was filler that could have been cut, because it didn't really show any hardships. It didn't push any movie making. It kind of just showed his relationship with Bill, which I feel like we already had enough of.
Well, I thought it showed the family dynamic.
And I thought you did enough of Bill. Wow. I
like Bill, but I'm saying objectively, I don't think this was necessary. I don't think it really added anything. So I think 8.5 is fair for it. Not much to really critique in regards to objectivity. And subjectively, on my LetterBox account, any documentary I'd put a default 6 unless it really stands out, because that's kind of just, documentaries aren't supposed to be very exciting. They're supposed to be informative and stuff. So I put this at a 6. There was a moment where it was going to dip lower towards 5 the first half, but I think the second half bumped it back up to a 6 with the standard documentary ratings for me. So I think 6 objectives is what I got. And then that's that.
All right, I guess it's my turn. Obviously, I'm gonna be biased because I picked this one. So, no, I'm kidding. I just because I'm a fan of documentaries, and I've seen a lot, and most of them generally follow the same sort of format and the same sort of subjects and what have you. This was very different for me, and after kind of watching this, I kind of had to rethink how a documentary should be presented, or how a documentary could be done versus how they generally are done. And I do think this is not necessarily the formula that should be for all of them, just because I think it depends on the subject and what you have. But I think this one probably gets as close as, at least I, am currently aware of, as getting as close to like almost a fly on the wall kind of perspective, because everybody in this, is fairly like honest. Brutally honest about most everything, and is kind of just open and showing themselves, regardless of whether it's good or it's bad for their image, which is very rare, especially in how guarded we are nowadays with how much access we have to people's information. So with that in mind, and then just how I don't really feel like I see a lot of that, I am going to give this a 9.
Sprinks.
All right, on to me. I usually start with objective, but I'm going to start with subjective this time on my enjoyment of this film. For it came out in 1999. Is that correct?
Yeah, 1999.
That sounds
all right. So for the time it came out, going with what it has or the access that it had at that time. So helping judge it on that, and also for the fact that it's an independent and not production made, to also go along with that, I thought the story was a bit jumpy, a little. It wasn't necessarily jarring at times. It was, Northwestern, and then on to Coven, and then on to family, back to film, family in film. It never really showed. Mark was a nice guy to the point where it never showed that the film was damaging family, even though at times it did. But it was mostly to Mark, family was more of an importance to be around than the film. So he would work on the film at home with his kids around, or he'd enjoy Thanksgiving and not talk about the film really at all. But later down the line, he'd ask his family to help him or whoever could. So that showed me in Mark's character that family was a little more important to him than the film itself, even though the whole thing is about Mark's vision on the film. I thought I guess I'll say cast, because they're not characters. The cast, all fine. I think it was interesting that they all had their own personal characteristics that were shown. For Mark, it was kind of the alcoholic side. His friend Mike had recovering drug addiction. His mom had strong accent. I forget the actor's name that they had. I want to say Rob, the guy with the white beard. He was very, very dramatic, theatrical, kind of in his speech and how he went. His brothers were kind of more the 50-50. Bill was a comedic add-on in his own way. So I think each character in some way had their own standout characterization, which helped not make them all feel the same, but it's also that they're just being themselves and it all mixed that well. But for what it is, and talking about the movie and getting into the very end where the movie actually was made, and funny enough, there was a problem that they had to fix 2 days beforehand, and everyone was helping out as much as they could and everything. I'm giving this movie a 5 on subjective. It didn't necessarily hold my attention. About I guess the first 15 minutes, you kind of know the tone and feel of the rest of the film. So if that's your cup of tea, then it's for you. Since we gave it a 9, so it's definitely up on his side of enjoyment. For me, however, it I guess I'd say slow paced, just home video-ish feel. So for that, I'll go to objective, which for me was very hard for me to decide. It was probably in the ballpark of Sinister on Greatest Showman, and how that wasn't his type of film. And for writer, when it came to Men, it kind of fit that for me, because there's things in this movie that didn't necessarily are around. There's no costume designer in the movie. There's no one making the costumes or anything, choosing what people wear. So that can't be really, rated. But then Mark's outfit choice is the Green Bay Packer jumper he wears, or the beanie, and he's wearing it quite a lot, showing his characteristics, which is a connection I made of the Packers, of him being a Packer fan. Packers is the home team of Wisconsin, so it also connects that not only is it Mark's favorite team, but it also connects to home and family, because he watched the Super Bowl at his parents' place, or his place, I guess, for that matter.
He lives at home with his parents.
Yeah, so
Well,
I thought that was a little connection made. There's no soundtrack. There's no soundtrack or score, but you have Mike playing on his guitar from time to time, and you have Bill singing at one point. And those are parts that are chosen to be a part and incorporated in the movie itself. So it was very difficult for me to choose things of, like, acting wise. No one's necessarily acting, but when they're on camera, the things that they say are what they're saying at the time of what they want to be said and recorded, because they know they are being recorded. So I guess that also kind of falls on the writing, because there's no script, there's no writing, but what they're saying is what they want to say. So it was just very difficult for me to rate it in that regard of, is what is being made for this entirety where it wants to be, which goes to the story of, is what they put out to express correct? And yes, it is. They wanted to talk about the documentary style of behind the scenes of Northwestern to Coven and so forth, and what was going on in Mark's life between that time, and they got that point across nail on the head, pretty much. But because of the difficulty for me, and the things that they do have, and the things they don't have, and the things that they don't, how it could still incorporate that is what is shown, I'm giving this a 5.5 to just put it right in the middle.
Okay.
All right.
Well,
that has been an American movie dissection.
Yeah, our first documentary.
It's all right. It's okay.
It's all right. It's okay.
There's something
You guys
to
live
live for. Jesus told me so.
Yeah. As always, you can find us on Spotify, Anchor. Fuck. I'm forgetting our. We have so many now.
We're on Castbox now, right?
Yeah, we're on Castbox. We're on Amazon. We're on
we
Google.
have sites. You can go look for them. Look us up. We'll be there.
Yeah.
Maybe so. Definitely yes.
More of a, the visual aid.
Yeah.
You got YouTube.
Yeah. If you want to see our brilliantly animated caricatures that Crimson made from scratch, watch that. And if you like just hearing us mumble and stutter and say a lot, in my case, listen to the podcast.
And and as always, follow us on our socials. We got Twitter. We're on all the major social sites. Any site.
We're pretty much every.
You can't really go wrong.
I'm not gonna go on that list. I mean, we're on all the major ones, so
It's basically like throwing a dart at a wall. You can't really miss.
Pretty
of
much.
Course, if you have any questions about anyone's point of view, or something that one of us brought up that someone else didn't necessarily go into, that you want to know more, just let us know in the comments, and we'll find a time allotted. I think we said the recaps or the times allotted that we'll be going over those. If you have any Q&As for us.
Yeah, and
we'll maybe answer some Q's and give some A's.
Yeah, and as always, I'm a geeky writer.
I'm Crimson Maroon.
I'm a character called Sinister Boy.
And I'm Sprinks.
And we will catch you next time. Later, everybody.
Bye.
Toodaloo.
Bye.